Hey there, welcome to the Road to Rich podcast. This is a podcast where we talk about all things business and life and just all kinds of stuff. And I have a fantastic guest with me today. My name is Aaron Rich. I'm your host. And my guest today is Matt Andrews. He's the owner of HammerDown Roofing. And Matt, you're a guy who's grown up here in Panama City. And you grew up in a family business. And what kind of lessons did you learn from growing up in a family business like that?
That's an awesome question. So, I think the thing I probably learned the most from my dad was treat people the way that you want to be treated. And that sounds like such a cliche and such a cornball thing to say, but like I just watched him live that out kind of always. And more than anything, that's been rewarding. And then that's what's made our business successful is trying to put ourselves in other people's shoes and treat people that special kind of way. And another thing he said really over and over again was leave it better than you found it. My dad was not a flashy guy in his philosophies at all, but the older I get, the more I find that the simple ones are the more truth to it.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what I try to live by is just treat people the way I want to be treated. I know you feel the same way.
I think I got the exact same advice when I was a kid, so I'm with you. And I think that speaks to kind of how we are as a community too, to where when you take care of your neighbor, they remember that.
Oh, for sure.
And that's one thing about where we live in Bay County is that, when you're taking care of people, the word gets around that you're taking care of people.
Things have changed. The world's evolved a lot. And, in what we do now, there's so many competitors and we have to do marketing. But in the world I grew up in, with my dad being one of the few guys to be in the industry, it was all word of mouth. I mean, I think maybe he had in his whole career 2 or 3 lettered trucks, and now we roll around with 7 fully wrapped vehicles. So it is a little bit different in today's world, but yeah, that's what it was all about. Early days. My dad started his business in '96, so I would have been like 6, 7 years old.
Working for your dad, yeah.
Yeah, and I always did. I always worked for my dad, and I learned a lot of really good values, and like I said, he was a man's man. He looked people in the eye, and it was actually I kind of had to make corrections to him as I got older, and it's hard doing that to your parents. But my dad shook your hand, right? And if he made a deal, that was what it was. It was his word was his bond, and I'm like, hey man, we're doing pretty big contracts now.
We got to do contracts, Dad.
We got to like write this stuff down and make people accountable for, I know you'll do what you say you're going to do, but we can't always trust that everybody else is going to do the same. So, but that's definitely my early bringing up was watching a man do what he said he was going to do. And that's helped me be successful.
No, that's awesome. That's great. That's great things. When you were growing up in that and working for your dad, was there a moment or a time where you realized that this was a career path for you? And that, and then that eventually led to you being your own entrepreneur and running your own business?
That's a really good question. I'll say the early parts, if I'm being really raw and being honest, I didn't really want it. I didn't want the roofing business. It wasn't something that called to me immediately. You're young and you don't know what you want. Part of me wanted to be a Nashville singer. I wanted to explore my entertainment side, and I did a little bit of entertaining and sang out at Tootsie's a little bit.
Nice.
I owned a detailing business. I worked at Angelo's Steak Pick for a very short, brief stint out there bussing tables, just kind of lost in the world as to what I wanted to do. But my dad kept showing up for me, and he said, no matter what, you're going to work, and he taught me another thing, just being consistent. And then I did start to fall in love with the relationship side of it. I didn't so much love the actual roofing labor side of it. I don't know a lot of people that'll tell you that they just love ripping off shingles and
100-degree weather,
100-degree weather,
500, humidity. Yeah.
I don't think there's a lot of people out there, maybe a few handful, that say they actually just love that side of it. Labor can be rewarding, but the part that really I think grabbed a hold of me was meeting with customers and starting to kind of build relationships with contractors. And that was the side of it that I was like, I like this. I like meeting people and getting to know people. And so I think the sales side of it for me was really exciting. And of course, that's like your first win in life, right? I was selling roofs for my dad. I was probably 22 years old at the time when I really started selling the roofs and seeing the fruits of success and, getting a little bit of taste of what that felt like. And so that I think, between the sales and the relationships, those were the things that kind of led me into it. But I'd have to say this, and this is one of the topics that I really wanted to talk about while I was on the show for young entrepreneurs, for anybody watching this, be consistent. because I watched through my early career people that continued to transition into different jobs, and they were just kind of looking for that next thing and that
Yeah,
next job.
for sure.
And I'm sure you've seen it too. I mean, it's just it's kind of a trap that we fall into because it's hard to stay consistent and it's hard to stay happy in a field. Thankfully, my wife of 10 years has really been an anchor for me, because I'll say I'm a very high strung. I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to do a podcast. I want to do
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
I want to own a landscape business. I think we all have that inside of us as entrepreneurs. We want to accomplish the world,
Yeah,
but
for
there's
sure.
something to be said for being consistent,
You
right?
know, and one of the challenges of being an entrepreneur is that as you develop your business, consistency means not just you being consistent, but the other people around you being consistent and you putting in processes and business, concepts into place that help make sure that your vision is consistent through your staff. And that's been a big learning thing for me personally.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I could testify to that. And again, my early learnings were from somebody that was very traditional, old school. And I got really, really fortunate that in 2016, I took a job for a $50 million roofing company. I mean, they were
Mm,
huge,
mm,
based out of Tallahassee, but all over the state of Florida. The owner, Dale Tadlock, was a very good Christian man. And it was a neat time in my life because I had never really felt pursued. I didn't go to college. I didn't get any degrees or anything like that. But I did take pride in what I did, and I had good follow through. And him seeking me out, it was it was an exciting feeling because he come into Panama City, and this was back when G Foley's was still a restaurant,
mm, mm.
and met me at G Foley's and was like, "Your name keeps coming up in this space,
Nice.
and I want you to work for me." It felt really good to be sought after. And if you're a young entrepreneur and you're, and at this point in my life, I had already started HammerDown. Actually, a lot of people
Mm,
don't know, but I started HammerDown for the first time, 2013, 2014.
mm.
And so I had already been kind of doing my own thing and getting a taste of what it was to be a young entrepreneur.
Yep.
I had two small babies at home, 15 months apart. So when they started knocking on my door asking for me to come work, my wife basically shoved me into their arms because she said, please. Because as a young entrepreneur, you're working 70 hours a
Oh
week,
yeah.
you're
Yeah.
wearing every ball cap.
Yeah, it's grueling. Yeah,
Yeah, and you
absolutely.
can't afford to pay people at that point in your life, so you're doing everything. I was on the roofs,
Yeah.
I was selling the roofs, I was trying to do some of the financial back end of the
Trying to raise kids
trying
and
to
being a
raise
dad
kids.
and a husband. Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah, so it was a unique opportunity that opened up to me, and the pursuit actually lasted somewhere around a year before I ended up going to work for them,
Mm-hmm.
and because originally they wanted me to move, and our family's just so rooted into Bay County.
Yeah, for sure.
Her parents are here, my parents are here, our support system is here,
Yeah.
and so we couldn't take a job opportunity anywhere, no matter how good it looked. We couldn't go anywhere else, and so they let me work for them in Panama City. But it was like I said, a really good. They had a why, they had a vision. They were very clear in their directions. They had a very big system in place. A lot of the things I learned from them, I still actively use in my business. I use the CRM
Mm-hmm.
and some of the processes they put into place. So that is big too. Young entrepreneurs, that is something that you can have a vision, you can have a dream, but if you don't have the right infrastructure and steps in place, and what is that they always say? What is that in that book Traction? You have a visionary and you have I always forget the other one. Help me, Aaron.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't read Traction.
Um, you're visionary, and then you're basically your systems creator, and that's my wife
Yeah.
in my case, right?
Yeah.
Because I am definitely always the big idea guy. But if you don't have both, I think a lot of times that's where you see failure in a business because without those steps and procedures in place, it is
Yeah, and
it's
then
really
you
hard.
become inconsistent if you don't have the processes that way. I was real fortunate when before I started my company, I was able to learn from a government contractor and see the processes they had in place and their systems and the data. And then when I got on my own, it let me know kind of a way that I could do it and grow my business intelligently and plan it that way. And sounds like that was a great thing for you to have that exposure to how that company was doing it
Yeah,
and you pull pieces of knowledge from those guys and that's a great thing.
absolutely.
That's awesome. So, well, very cool. So, you guys being Bay County natives, how do you think that has shaped your business to what it is today?
That's a really good question. You know, I think around here we have just a phenomenal community of people, and you know, you're from here, right?
Hmm.
You born and raised, and so we definitely had that small town feel around here coming up as kids. I
Yeah.
mean, our parents trusted us in the neighborhoods, riding bikes until it was dark. And, you know, I don't know if that was the right or wrong thing to do, but we were always out. You know, I mean, I remember crossing Highway 77. And for those of you watching, it was not what it is now. You know, of course, I've got pictures of 77 from my great grandmother. They actually had a house that was kind of cornered there next to. It was basically where the grocery outlet is now,
Yeah.
is where they had a home, and it was all dirt roads, and you could see the 2-story candy store. And you know, obviously I didn't grow up in that era, but it was still a much slower paced Panama City,
Yeah.
Lynn Haven area, because Lynn Haven was really, that's where I spent majority of all my life. I grew up on Minnesota Avenue, which is
Hmm.
the road Mosley High is on, and then we ended up moving to Montana, where my dad remodeled a house over there on the water, and we ended up living there for many years. So I spent all my early childhood there, but I always felt safe in my community, and I think that, I'm sure, has a lot to do with a lot of our successes around here. You know, I heard Tommy Ford speak about it not too long ago, about one of the main reasons people move to Bay County is safety.
Yeah.
I think you don't really realize that as a kid. It's just like a given. It was a privilege that we, now that we're older, we can reflect, and we've traveled and we've seen different
You see
areas.
what other
And
places are like. Yeah.
yeah, so you don't really know how good you've got it. You're just like, this, I'm sure everybody lives in a cool little town like this. And
No.
that's not the
No, they
case.
don't. Yeah.
No, but that's, I think, probably a big part of what shaped us. And then people around here do support locals, and they support people that support the community. And I don't know that it's like that everywhere, you know. So
It definitely is not, and we talk about that a lot, you know, in the marketing business, to where to understand what Bay County is and how business works in Bay County. I think living here, you see it, and it's like what you said. It's a safe place, and it's a place where we're taking care of each other, and a place where we're looking out for each other, and I think that speaks to what you do, and your job is you're taking care of these people's homes, and you're giving them protection from elements, and making sure they're in a good place with it and safe. And I can see that in the things that you guys put out there about the quality of what you do, and the thought behind it.
yeah.
So yeah, it's a great thing.
Thanks. That's actually, I Google us a lot because I'm always checking on our reviews and where we're at with things, and you know, what we look like on a Google presence. And when I Googled yesterday, you know, AI gives you a description of your business.
Hmm.
I'm sure you've probably done it before too. And I read it to my wife, and she's like, "Wow, thanks AI. That was really flattering." It was, you
Yeah.
know, it was basically something to the effect that HammerDown's a very community-driven business with a strong sense of urgency to their customers and relationships, and puts quality at the forefront of their work. And you know, stuff like that. Like, I know it was AI generated, but it came from
Yeah.
genuine reviews from customers that had been written. So no, it is. It's a great feeling, and I think more than anything, treating people, you know, making a relationship with people. That's what you want to do.
Yeah.
Like, if you're a young entrepreneur, like, it is definitely not quantity, it's quality. It's quality of relationships with people.
Hmm.
That's been the probably the cornerstone of success for us, and why we have the clients that we have. Because I mean, I got people that call me that I did roof work for 18, 19 years ago, that
Hmm.
have stored my number. That's flattering in
And they remember
itself.
it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they remember the experience. I'll be honest with you, some of these people I don't remember, some of them I do remember. You know, you have a lot of interactions through the years, but just the fact that they held on to my information,
Yeah.
and that they had a good experience with me that many years ago, and they still
And
want to call me.
and they remembered that 18 years later. Yeah. It's
Oh,
amazing.
I've got one, because my grandfather, he was my step grandfather, but he worked for our business for a little while. And back then, everything was on paper,
Hmm.
right? I mean, all their little invoices, everything was on little paper slips. And I've had, you know, people hold on to those, and like, your grandfather roofed my house in, you know, 1997, and
It's pretty cool.
here's the slip, you know. And it's
Mhm.
funny because actually one lady was like, "Can you do it for the same price your grandpa did?"
No.
I'm like, "Oh, ma'am, I wish I could. I wish I could, but I would lose my lunch if I did it for what my grandpa did."
That's funny. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know, it's funny that, you know, your dad, you had mentioned, was basically referral business, you know, for his tire and doing it. And I think today's world is not drastically different here in Bay County because there's so much of it that's referral based. And yes, there's a digital component to it where people are giving reviews, but we're all interconnected so closely together in this community that those things matter and the connections matter. I think just as much as they did 10, 20 years ago. It's just out there in a place where you can search for it and do it. But
Yeah.
anytime we have businesses that come to us for marketing, I think that's the one thing I can point to them and say, this is the easiest thing you can do to help yourself is get people to review your business and talk about what they've done. Because just like you did, you Googled it and it told you what you were about. And they
Yeah.
probably couldn't have said it better yourself. But those are your customers saying what that is. So any business owners out there listening, the number one thing you can do to help your business out is get reviews and get people saying what you're doing for them. And that speaks volumes.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's a statistic, and I'm not even going to try to quote it because anybody that quotes statistics is probably wrong. But it's a really high number of engagement with customer testimonials and reviews, right?
Mhm.
So you and I could sit here and talk about our business all day long, and that's only going to go so far. People want to hear it from other people.
Mhm.
That's the bottom line.
Absolutely.
We can say, yes, we know we're men of integrity. Yes, we're going to have follow through. Yes, we're going to have commitment. But when they hear it from the lips of a customer,
Yeah.
it resonates.
It
And I would
matters,
say
yeah.
it's same for me,
It's something like 80% of people that make purchase decisions are going to go and look at online reviews before making that purchase decision. So
Yeah.
that tells you everything you need to know right there. People are going to look, and you got to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward with having people do it and be proactive about asking. It pays huge dividends to businesses.
I do it. God, when we travel, I do it. I
Yeah,
mean, anytime we're looking at restaurants or anything that we're
all the
considering
time.
doing, I mean,
Yep.
I always at least go through the first handful of reviews and
Yeah.
what's going on, especially the newest ones. I
Well,
think
especially
those
if they
are,
have a high quantity of like 5-star reviews, I mean, it's going to be a good experience that way.
yeah.
There's a place in Charleston, South Carolina, and y'all can Google it, right? They have something like 29,000 reviews on their restaurant.
Holy
And it's
smokes.
the most I've ever seen of any business. It's unbelievable, right? And I actually have he's got these cards that he has on the table with these motivational things that he has in the little cup holder. And so I took some of those, I got them in my office. But it was a great experience. The guy and his family came by the table and talked to everybody. Every single person that goes through that place, they touch, right?
Wow.
And it was a personal experience that you get to have there. And so I can see why they do it. But they've been asking for reviews for years and years and years. And they literally have, it's probably over 30,000 now. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, but you see, though, for them, how easy it is to get the reviews because, like you said, they put their personal touch in that place and they are physically there and they're
Yeah.
making sure that their operations go in a certain way. I mean, it's just like Ferrucci's down here. You go down there, you're going to see Matt Remento, or you're going to see both of them.
Yep.
And just like it was at Anahito's, you always saw one of them or both of them making that a special dining experience for
Absolutely.
everybody in there. And they did that for years and years, and they have a phenomenal reputation in the restaurant industry. And I think that's another big thing for entrepreneurs is even once you put those systems in place, people want to hear from the ownership. No matter how good your staff is, your sales team is, any of that. And I think sometimes as we grow in our businesses, we kind of lose sight of that. But like me stopping by a job site means the world to people.
Yeah.
And I'm not there to do anything. I'm not changing the course of the direction of the fate of their job or
Yeah.
anything. Are my guys working harder? Probably not. I mean, I'm not a I'm not a dictator or a tyrant, so I'm not there to yell but when they see me, it's very impactful for them, just because it's like you care,
Yeah.
from an ownership level, you probably have a million other things you could be doing running your business, but
But you're standing behind the work that you're doing.
yes,
And that shows that you care.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think so. So that's definitely advice I would give to anybody, no matter what your level of success is. Don't remove yourself so far from a business that personal touch goes away.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge key factor for people to continue to be successful.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
Awesome. So tell me about a challenge that you faced in business and how did you overcome that?
Oh man, yeah. I think that same relationship challenge with inside of an organization, finding the right people for the right positions
Mhm.
is really really tough. also, knowing when to either transition somebody into another position or let somebody go. I think that was a really tough thing for me.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
I'm definitely I'm an assertive person, but when it comes to things like that, I can be very passive and just kind of let things go. And so I think as you grow and as you hire, making sure you have the right people for the job is big. And I know that's something that in most all entrepreneurship spaces, that's something that gets talked about consistently. But there's a reason that gets talked about so
Well,
much.
and knowing when somebody's wrong, like I think you get a gut feeling like, hey, this isn't working out, and doing that. I think sometimes for entrepreneurs, knowing how to say that somebody's the wrong fit is
Definitely.
is a really key part of growing.
I agree. And I think for me too, like I build personal relationships with everybody in my organization.
Mm,
We have a Christmas party, it's at our house. I
yeah,
mean, we
awesome.
do a company appreciation party. We rent a house and try to bring everybody out. And so for me, everybody from, I mean, I could tell you every employee's name. I know all of from the ground cleaner to the sales team to everybody that works for us, and so that makes it really tricky when you build those relationships with people and you have them in your organization for a long time, and things aren't working out anymore. But you're always better off to have the hard conversations, and I've always felt better after I've had them.
Yeah,
Sometimes you feel like I think that's probably been one of the most gut wrenching things, is sitting people down to let them go.
yeah,
But it's definitely always something I've put a lot of thought into, and knew that I was making the right move before I did it. But you're always better off. And most of the time, I heard this too, you're 6 months too late.
yeah,
People that are emotionally involved and attached to the level that I am, usually you've waited too long. And I'll say if I could go back and make some changes, I probably would have let people go a little sooner. I even let like family personal attachment. I grew up with a guy,
mm,
and his brother worked for me for years, and he was a phenomenal installer, but he had a horrible temperament, and he just didn't reflect who we were as
yeah,
a company.
yep,
His character was not that of what our character was, and I felt such confliction about that. On one hand, he had a great skill set. On the other, I had a really close personal relationship with his brother, which him and his brother were just very, very different people. And that was a very tough one.
yeah. That definitely is a tough thing. Somebody gave me advice many years ago, and they told me that when it's time to let someone go, you know, waiting on that is actually a disservice for them because you're holding them back from moving on to the next thing. If you know it's not working out for you there, right? The best thing is for you both to move on and to get them to where they can get to another opportunity that's going to work out better for them in life. And the same thing for you, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah. Has there ever been a decision that you made in business that you think totally changed the trajectory of where you were going?
Um, that's a really good question, and that's definitely something to think about. But I think, and I'll kind of continue to default back to my original answer of consistency, because when I named my business, I named it HammerDown Development, and I had intentions of doing a lot of things, grander visions of doing developments and building and commercial building.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying those aspirations don't exist inside of me still. But I think the thing that really kind of helped define us and center us was we're roofing.
Mm-hmm.
That is what we do. And we're going to do a fine job. We're going to do a top notch job at what
Mm-hmm.
we do, and making that commitment and staying true to that, I think has been a big factor in our trajectory, our success. And it even took a little bit of rebranding to just say, because I'll be honest with you, when I first started 2013, 2014, you know, I didn't have a whole lot of recognition. I didn't have any marketing, or nobody really knew who I was. So I was really willing to do anything. I mean, I think some of my first jobs included demoing fences and
Mm-hmm.
decks and building fences.
Yeah.
And
As you're ramping up the business. Yeah.
yeah, just kind
Mm-hmm.
of didn't. I was out there, going with the hammer and the nails in my hands, making it happen. And I think then that was in the early parts. I was like, I'll just do whatever,
Yeah.
like to be successful. And I think that's kind of an entrepreneurial spirit,
Sure.
right?
It
You're
is.
like,
Yeah.
I will do whatever it takes to
Yeah.
be successful. And that's something too. Like if you're a young entrepreneur, like you have to get nitty and gritty, and especially if you're in the industry that I'm in. You may have to go out there and actually do the hard work for a while, whatever that looks like I mean, I remember getting up Saturday mornings and going and doing roof repairs and pressure washing and, just whatever,
Yeah.
had a young family and
Yeah. Do what you have to do. Yeah.
and I knew I didn't want to work for anybody for the rest of my life. I knew that wasn't what was in the cards for me. I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. But yeah, I think the thing that really probably helped our overall trajectory path was just setting we're going to be a roofing company, and that's what we want to be known for.
Yeah.
That's what when you think roofing, you're thinking of us.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. When I think some of that, when you're, especially an early on entrepreneur, you're growing your business, I think figuring out what you are and also figuring out what you aren't is part of that. And I think sometimes you do things and you're like, all right, well, that's not really what we're best at. And so we're going to leave that to somebody else and focus here. I think that's just part of the entrepreneurial journey that we go through, man.
It is, and it's an evolving thing too, because even still, like I'm taking constant reevaluation of what we're doing.
Yeah, you have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so one thing too that I kind of pride myself on that's a little bit different than, a lot of the bigger roofing companies, and I still wouldn't classify us a big roofing company. We're still, I think we're an in-between. We're in between a mom and pop and what would be considered a big roofing company. But I don't subcontract work out. So in the 6 years of operation, we have subcontracted one roofing job out.
Yeah.
And that's something I'm pretty proud of, but it's also something that I'm in evaluation of because I do see the level of growth that, sometimes I think we even stunt ourselves in it because it's almost a prideful thing.
Yeah.
Right. I'm like, no, we do the work, I'm not going to sub it out. But then I look at some of the success of other companies and how it does work. And if you can get the correct subcontractors and have the proper management in place, maybe that's not a bad idea. Right. So I don't think getting stuck in traditional thinking is good. I do think you should continue to evaluate your business, evaluate where you're at, what you're good at, and is this really working? Because I think a lot of times we're prideful and we're like, yeah, we're good at that. I'm good at that. And well, no, not really. I mean, and really we could do this differently and we could do this better. And so just be in that constant state of evaluation, not necessarily comparison, because comparison's a thief of joy.
Yeah.
Be
who you are.
Be who you are, because that's really tough too, and I think that's really tough for this generation. Even my generation, I think it's really tough for. And we're always looking at social media. We're always comparing ourselves to the other guy, and that's.
But that is false idolization, hope, whatever you want to call it. I stopped worrying about my competition years ago, and some of them are friends of mine, man. And I just don't worry about them. We're gonna do the best we can do as a business, and we're gonna keep growing and getting better at what we do. And if I'm pushing that, we're gonna be all right. And I think that's a takeaway for business owners. Don't worry about the noise elsewhere, man. You're competing with yourself.
Amen.
And when you're competing with yourself, you just try to get better every single day. And if you keep doing that, you're gonna be just fine.
You close so many doors by being that way too. One thing I think I've also, done well is throughout my career, I have learned from so many other roofers. I learned from my dad. I learned from Del Tadlock. I learned from David Lewis, who was a pretty big name around here. I learned from Jerry Wilson. I've learned from a lot of these guys, things to do and things not to do. I've learned a little bit of both from those guys, and that's been a really good experience. But another thing too is shaking the hand of every competitor I see. I always walk up and introduce myself. And one of the things that I do is if there's something I can do that maybe your company doesn't necessarily do, I'd love that opportunity. Talk to me.
Yeah.
We have
you can find ways to work together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's really, that helped me a lot too in my early years was the very first time we got going, David Lewis was kind of on his way out the door and I got to know him really well. He was a man of God and prayed with me and talked with me and was just a very good early mentor as well, but he was ready to retire and didn't really have a successor and started subcontracting work to me in the very end of his career and the beginning of mine. So
it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. So
it's nice that they think highly enough to send that work your way too, that they trust you that way. And we had a similar experience back in the day when Ryan Neves was here with Neves Media. We're working with his brother. He was serving on the school board and they needed some help on websites for the school board, and Ryan couldn't do it because he's a board member. And he called me and said, hey, this is something that, they might need your help with. And, I thought the world of that he thought enough of us and what we were doing to be the ones that he called. And so that means a lot when people do that.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And I think that, like I said, it's really important for young entrepreneurs. Don't compete with anybody. Compete with yourself and just continue to try to do better in what you're doing and be genuine in your intentions towards others. I genuinely wish success for everybody in my space
Hmm.
that does what I do, because it's an extremely tough industry. It's an industry with a lot of liability. There's a lot of danger involved in what we do. It's definitely a grueling and hard job for everybody that is involved in it, and so I really genuinely wish everybody doing it success. I mean, obviously, I hope they're doing it the right way with integrity and treating people right. But
Hmm.
I want success for those in this platform, just
That's
like you
cool.
want success for people in your
Yeah,
platform.
for sure. That's awesome. Very cool. So where do you see HammerDown being 5 years from now?
I have we evaluate that a lot, and we actually did some coaching last year, set some goals for ourselves, and 6 years, 5 years, that'll put us a little over the 10-year mark. And I don't see things tremendously different, although it's hard to think that they wouldn't be. Our growth year after year has been consistent. Actually, from year one to year two was 100% growth. From year two to year three was a 75% growth.
It's
I
awesome.
mean, we've had really good growth year end every single year, and but I think we've grown at a rate that's and this is important too. So I met a guy, and I won't mention his name, but he runs a very large roofing company as well. We did a job for them probably about 2-3 years ago, and they did 26 million in their space, which is great. I mean,
Hmm.
that's a very big successful roofing company. But he sat in my living room and talked to me about the pains of being a company that size.
Yeah.
And that year he had, actually, I'm pretty sure it was the same year, he said he had 3 million in liquidated damages. Keep in mind, my company probably did around that in revenue that year.
Hmm.
So his damage to people was what my entire year's revenue
Wow,
was.
that's wild.
And yeah, so like I was like, wow, like I don't know how you sleep at night, and he was basically saying it was so high stress with all the things that they had going on. And right now, yeah, I'd be lying to say we don't have high stress moments and times, but our business is manageable and it's growing at a rate where we can put the right procedures and structures into place. And
Yeah.
don't outgrow yourself in a sense. Don't get so far ahead of yourself that you do start to have those damages and those tarnishing. Because I mean, there's areas where I'm sure he's probably not very welcome anymore
Yeah.
because of those
Well, and
damages.
if you can't ensure quality, then consistency fails, and then you're talking about reputation issues and people wanting to use you. So it gets back to what you're saying in the beginning.
Yeah.
Lack of consistency and lack of quality will eventually lead to the demise of a business that way. I've seen it a million times.
Yeah, and I would rather not be in business than to have some really, really large business but have hurt all of these people because, I mean, I'm a man of faith. I believe in Jesus, and I don't want to treat anybody in a way that is not honoring and pleasing to Him. And so I would rather not exist in this space and hurt people than to be successful and to be hurting people. So
Yeah.
I definitely think that's a big one. Where I see us, in the next 5 years is continuing to grow, continuing to do probably more towards the Walton County area as it
Mm.
just continues to flourish and grow. We're all growing. Bay County's growing. It's growing all around us, and that's a beautiful thing. And we've been blessed to be in an area of growth.
Yeah.
So I think we'll grow right along with it. But the hopes, the prayers for us is to just grow at that same consistency rate where we can deliver that quality, deliver that service, and continue the relationships even as we get bigger, because that's kind of something I've been really trying to mentor the younger ones that work for me about that relationship aspect
Yep.
of it. I just got a call right before I walked in here. One of my project managers, we're roofing a house for a lady. She's just recently widowed, and she obviously doesn't have her husband there to ask the questions.
Yeah.
So he took a little bit of extra time with her.
Yeah. Spend some time.
Yeah,
It's
and
good.
that's what he was calling to tell me was, hey, I want you to know, I spent a lot of time with the customer. I walked around with her, and I told her if she needed anything, even if it's not roofing related,
Mm.
let us know, and we'll be more than happy to help. And that's, I think, a really big one. I mean, we did a roof for a lady. This was probably 3 or 4 years ago now, And same situation, husband had passed, and she was just, you could tell she was really going through a hard time, and she just, she could tell she just needed somebody. And I gave her a hug, and she just cried and cried and said that, she had felt so alone, and she was so thankful that, we were spending the time with her. And I gave her my information. I said, hey, if you need something, it doesn't have to be roofing related.
Yeah.
Just call me. And she did. She reached out probably a month or two after we did a roof, and she said, I'm finally ready to part with my husband's vehicle, and I can't get it to start. I think it's a dead battery, but I can't find it.
Yeah.
So she's on the, pretty far side of Water Sound out there. So about an hour drive from my house, but not a problem. So I jumped in the truck that morning, drove out there with jumper cables.
Nice.
Of course, it's a Mercedes, so the battery was in the back somewhere underneath the compartment. It wasn't easy to find. So it wasn't for lack of trying on her part. She just couldn't find the battery.
Yeah.
And so I went out there and jumped it, and she hugged my neck again. And but that's what it's about. You know, that's stuff like that.
That's nice when you can be there for somebody that way. And I want to ask you too. You recently had a time where you got to meet Russell Brand and hear his story, and I think his story is pretty interesting because he's gone through a lot of changes in his life. From listening to him, what did you learn from him that you appreciated?
Oh my gosh, I hope he sees this. So
I hope he does too.
We had like a really we had a great connection. And I asked a question. I was actually the last question of the night, and it was burdensome. I wanted to ask him so bad, and of course, a lot of the people had interesting questions. And one of the ladies asked him about one of the films and him being an understudy, or I think he was the understudy for the Messiah, or some Hollywood questions about some of his acting gigs and different things. But one of the things I noticed in him was things I noticed in my 10-year-old son who's autistic, right? He stemmed a lot. He couldn't stop moving his knee and his leg, and he was barefoot, which is a confinement. A lot of autistic people don't like to have shoes on. My son can't stand it. I mean, we've lost more shoes than I can count because he doesn't keep them on his feet.
Yeah.
And so that was actually my question to him was, had he ever considered the fact that he might be on the spectrum? And it kind of I think it really caught him off guard.
Yeah.
Because it's like and it was so funny because in Russell Brand fashion with his accent, he goes, so is this how they're telling me? And, and so the whole thing was really comedic, and everybody burst out laughing. And I was like, God, I hope I didn't offend him, and he answered the question and said that he had actually, kind of given some thought that maybe not so much to autism, but he was definitely on some kind of spectrum, some kind of ADHD, he's very high wired. He articulates out of this world, man. I mean, he could talk me and you into a corner. I mean, he is just, his words, and they make sense. I mean,
I've heard him talk. He's pretty fascinating to listen to.
He absolutely is. He makes great sense. He articulates phenomenally. Very interesting person to sit and listen to for an hour. It was actually funny when they introduced him. He had a musician there, just kind of strumming and playing. The musician said, "Everyone, please sit really still." He's very easily distracted. He's like, I'm not trying to be funny. Like I'm being for real. I'm being honest with you. He's very easily distracted, and so try to be as less movement in the crowd because it was in a small coffee shop, kind of an intimate setting.
Yep.
And I thought that was kind of funny. But so when it was over, everybody stood in line for the meet and greets and all that, and I didn't. I walked out and was just talking to my wife, and it was the old Florida Fish House, and I think that's such a beautiful spot. So her and I just kind of went to the back porch and started talking, and I was there with Jessica Ling. She was the one who invited me, and Jessica comes out. She's like, "Matt, he's looking for you. He's looking for you." I'm like, "What?" She's like, "Russell Brand, he's looking for you." I'm like, "Oh, okay." She's like, come on, you got to come back in." And so of course I go back in, and he's got, basically, for lack of better words, groupies, pictures and all that going on. So I just kind of back off and I don't say anything. And I stand there kind of probably 5 or 6 foot away from where he's at. He turns around and I just knew we were going to hug, and he wasn't hugging people. I mean, he was taking pictures, and wasn't like I saw him hug the crowd. And no, I felt a connection with the guy, and he asked for me, and I was like, cool. So we did have a good connection.
That's pretty awesome.
And so we had like a full blown embrace, which I was kind of mad that nobody caught on camera or took a picture of. I was like, I got a full blown embrace with Russell Brand, and no one even caught it. But we did get some good pictures together and all that. But just talking to him, he was very interested in my son and asked some great questions. And I told him, I said, one of the reasons I said what I said is you're such an amazing person. I said, you're brilliant. And I said, if anything, if you do have autism, it's your superpower.
Yeah.
And he was very flattered by that. And I said, but really what I would want is if you ever do come to that conclusion, that you be an advocate. I said, because you have a big platform, you have a big space. And what I want for my son and for all those that have disabilities is somebody to advocate.
Yeah. To see other people that are doing great things that they can do too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody to idolize, wow, they have autism and look at what they've done, look at what they've achieved and look at what they've overcome. And but his whole testimony was great. Of course, his pastor was there supporting him, which I thought was really neat because he's going to church out there pretty close to that coffee shop. And
very cool.
It was. He had a lot of support from his church there, and he talked a lot about what it is to kind of be a believer and what it is for him. And he dropped a few F words and a few choice words, but he was like, he's like, I'm trying to shape all that up, and it was great though, I mean, and he talked about his children and what it means for them in today's world and how he doesn't want them to conform to what everybody's telling them, and that part was he made me laugh out loud right there because he's like, you tell your kids don't conform, don't do this, don't, and then you ask them with something and they're like, and that, and so that was funny to me.
I got a friend of mine that says I love Jesus, but I like to cuss a little bit. So
I think he would get on board with that one for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think if we're all being honest, we probably do it a little more than we should. I'm in an
definitely more than I should.
I'm in an industry full of men, and that's something that I have to continue to remind myself of. And that's, I think with anything, it's like that goes back to that consistency of going to church, believing in your faith, reading your Bible, connecting with God, because it's so easy to fall out of the routine of it. I mean, it's not like you accept Jesus one day and then it's over.
It takes constant work that way.
Yeah. I think that's something that I'm understanding more and more as I get older, that because you get on these points in life where you're like on fire for the Lord. And I think that happened for me when my son was born. I told you briefly before this, he was born prematurely. He was 26 weeks, 2 pounds and some ounces, dropped down to 1 pound and some ounces. We spent 86 days in the NICU being told every horror story.
That's crazy.
Yeah. The leading physician there is telling us, hey, long-term oxygen exposure, all the horrible side effects that, being born so prematurely could bring to a child. And it's really debilitating going through that. But all I could do in my head was just picture Jesus holding my son up and like, he's in your hands.
Yeah.
It's like, this is out of my control.
Man.
And that was, and I think that's probably the most on fire I've ever been for the Lord, because I knew in my heart all I could do was trust him. It wasn't anything else. It wasn't nothing I could do.
Out of your control.
Yeah. And I think those are some of the most humbling moments that anybody goes through in their life, or, when you deal with an illness or a sickness or a problem with your child, and it is out of your control, and you do have to have faith, and whatever the outcome is it's up to God at that point.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I know you mentioned with your son too that he's been part of the ECAP program here at FSU Panama City, and you guys are involved in that and have continued to stay involved even though he's not there anymore. Yeah. What does that program mean to you? Talk to our folks a little bit about that.
Oh man, that means the world to us. It's been one of the best programs that our son's ever been a part of. Getting diagnosed with autism. I didn't know very much about autism, and probably a lot of you watching don't. Maybe some of you do. I feel like it's impacted so many more families now. We've just seen such a uptick in the numbers of autism, and I won't speak on that, but I will speak on the FSU ECAP, and ECAP stands for Early Childhood Autism Program. When we took our son there, it was shortly after the diagnosis, and he was nonverbal. He did like a lot of autistic children, grabbed you by the hand, walked you to what he wanted, pointed at things, grunted, made noises. And, which my wife, that was her 4th child. It was my first. I didn't know. I thought he was just slower to develop, and he was maybe a little bit delayed. I didn't know. Thankfully, my wife was accepting of the fact that, hey, this isn't right and we need to get some help. And I think that was kind of hard for me too as a dad to like, no, there's nothing wrong with my son,
for sure.
Not that it makes a child any less. My son is a awesome child. And but being part of that program, that was where he learned to speak. That was where So there's a kind of a funny thing in our house. My wife, if she was here, would not be laughing at all. But he loves the sound of babies crying, and it's not in a sick or mean way at all. But when he was very young,
Yeah.
he has sensory disorder.
Mhm.
So crying was very disturbing to him. He would cry himself. If another baby or child was crying, it would almost cause an immediate reaction for him to cry and
No kidding.
scream and
Wow.
be very
Yeah.
overstimulated. And so what they did was they worked with him on it. Obviously, it started with headphones and distancing and learning to ask to leave a space if it was bothering you. But through that, they made him watch videos of infants crying. And it got to the point where not only did they get him over his fear, but now it is hysterical
It's
to
kind
him.
of connected to it that way.
He's connected to it. He'll sit on YouTube and watch videos of babies crying, and it's a lot of them are silly little videos, but he'll laugh at them now.
Yeah.
He thinks it's funny. So not only was he able to overcome it and tolerate it, but now he's able to kind of laugh at it.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
so that just he was simple things like haircut. He couldn't do a haircut because the clippers were overstimulating.
Yeah.
And they work with them on real life things, and it does stand for early childhood, but that program has developed on into younger youth that still need their assistance. They've
Mhm.
built an apartment inside of there to help them learn how to do the
Yeah,
basics.
I've seen the room that you're talking about. It's cool to teach them how to do things in the house and all that.
Yeah.
And they're doing amazing things out there.
Yeah.
And we were talking a little bit before that, I think that program continues to expand, and I think they're looking at Tallahassee to be able to start some operations over there and do those kind of things. So I hope that happens.
I do too.
Because being able to touch lives and affect kids like yours, that's a great thing that's happening right here in our community at a very
Yes.
high level.
Yes, and if you have somebody in your life that's on the spectrum, please try to make that a resource for them. And even if you don't feel like you can afford it, when we first started out there, we got assistance ourselves. Their scholarship, George Butchkus, their family has continued to give back to that program. There's just a lot that you can do that you don't really realize. All the financial help that you can get there to get started. They want you in the program. There is a waiting list, so if you want to be a part of it,
Yeah.
I suggest the sooner the better, for sure.
For sure. That's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. Hey, how do you feel that going through the process of, and I know you're a super connected dad, how has that changed the way you feel about your work-life balance?
Yeah, I think that kind of, for me, the connection that I have with my kids, because a lot of times I get really upset sometimes with the way that my employees do things or the way something's going. Having a son, and obviously children in general, but having a son on the spectrum has taught me patience that I never knew I could have.
Yeah.
I will say, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a short fuse person, but um, I certainly have a much longer fuse because of him. Obviously, I grew up in a traditional home where if you talk back, you were going to get smacked or popped
Mhm.
or all that, and
Yep.
and I unlearned all of that with my son because there was no outcome to that. You popped him or smacked him, and you cannot beat the autism out of a child, and so it teaches you how to work with them. And that was something that we learned in that therapy too. Was they actually brought us in for training on this is how we're getting him to do things.
Yeah.
This is these are
And they showed you guys things like
yes.
that.
Oh
That's
yeah,
awesome.
it was. I mean, even like I said with the hair cutting, like they would put gummies on a table and like if you can sit still for X amount of seconds, you get a gummy.
Yeah.
It was a very rewarding program. My son still works very well on that. He loves his iPad, he loves his Switch and his video games, and
Yeah.
so I think that's kind of conveyed over into my business too. Is I've really tried to do the same thing with my employees. Obviously, have that sense of patience with them, understanding, and everybody goes through situations, and I think that's something too as a employer, as an entrepreneur, you have to kind of understand that you wear the emotional hat for your entire staff.
Yep. You set the tone.
You do. You set the tone, and you're also you're pretty responsible for their emotions, and they're going to dump their emotions all over you. And you have to understand too that at the end of the day, not that they don't care about you, but your emotional needs are not going to get met by your staff.
Yep.
right? And that's kind of a tough one, I think, sometimes too, because you're like, what about me?
Everybody else's needs got to get met first.
What about me? You know, and of course, I go home and cry to my wife every once in a while, and she's like, that's not their responsibility.
I go fishing, let it all out there, man. Yep.
Yeah,
I'm with you.
Yeah, so. but you know, so that's a big one is and being okay with that too. You know, being okay with their emotional needs. I mean, 2 weeks ago, right before we left for vacation, one of my employees, he's a project manager, his son got in trouble at school, and he said, would you talk to him? He respects you.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow. I was like, it's
kind of cool.
It was, you know, so I pulled him up in my office. I have an upstairs office in our warehouse, and I sat him down, and, you know, first and foremost, I talked to him about Jesus and that relationship with Jesus, because he was having some anger issues. And I think he's a really smart, bright kid. And I think sometimes school's actually harder for the smarter ones. They can't sit still. They're like, I know this already.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of his mentality to it all. But, you know, we had a good conversation about God, good conversation about Jesus. I think they're actually going to church with us tonight.
Nice. That's awesome.
And some of that, being able to mentor to him a little bit, got him interested in wanting to come to church. And, of course, my kids go every Wednesday and Sunday. So my little girl's homeschooled. She's up there at the office all the time. So she's like, come to church with us, come to church with us. She's, you know, echoing the same thing she hears mommy and daddy saying. And that's awesome that she's inviting people to church. Awesome. Yeah, it is. It is.
A friend and I were talking the other day, and this kind of gets into what you were talking about with learning to be patient. And, you know, God puts things in our path to build us into the people that we become, right? And he's molding us and shaping us. And I think sometimes we see these hard things and we think, well, why is this me? Well, God's just trying to shape you, man. And so, like, you know, these things end up making you a more patient, kind, understanding person that can do these things for other people. So we in turn can help people better, you know?
Amen to that.
Yeah. So,
but in the cool. midst of it all, though, you feel like God's beating the hell out of you. I mean, that's in those really tough situations, you know, and I can see why some people get frustrated with inside of their spiritual beliefs, because it's like, why are you letting me go through this? Why are you letting these horrible things happen?
But you don't understand at the moment.
No.
You know, you look back at it, you know, in due time, and you realize that, you know, these terrible things that have happened to you and these things that you wish never happened to you and made you somebody who's a better version of yourself, you know, and, you know, things that have happened to me in my life, man, now I can be more compassionate and understanding to people around me, and be a better friend, and be a better father, and be a better, you know, person to the people around me. Yeah. And that's kind of what you hope, you know, and I think that kind of portrays into business that way too, to where, you know, we're always a work in progress, and where we end up is not necessarily where we started thinking we were going when we start these things out.
That's for sure. That's for sure. Yeah. And, you know, some of the most terrible things, and I certainly won't get into my views or beliefs, but, you know, like that most recent event with Charlie Kirk, you know, that's obviously sad, and it's been really impactful, I think, to a lot of people. But already one of the really amazing things that have come out of it are the lives that have been converted. You know, the exposure that he now gets at a level where people are watching. You know, I've seen videos, reels, TikToks, all these different things that have been sent to me of atheists and non-believers and those that are turning their life over to Christ. My church doors were packed out, and I think that's a really special thing, that, you know, his life was so impactful that it's starting a movement for Christ. And so while it is painful and it is hard to lose somebody like that, and I'm sure his family is going through a really, really tough time right now, and my thoughts and prayers are with them, but you know, what's taking place out of this, the lives that are saved, I think that the life he lived, this is what he would have wanted. This is what he would have wanted out of his life, is for there to be a movement for Jesus. And that's, I think, a really, really awesome thing.
Absolutely. And you hope that something positive comes out of those things. Yes, it's a negative thing that happened, but, you know, the end result is, you know, maybe it changes people's lives, and maybe we become a better country because we start thinking about who we want to be, you know. And, you know, I hope that anything that's negative in people's lives, they can look at it with that perspective. It takes time.
Yeah.
It definitely takes time. And I think that, you know, we got to work on that all the time.
It's made me want to live with more conviction. I mean, just right away. And I think one of the things that stood out to me the most was Charlie Kirk's kids will know, in a sense, who he was and what he stood for. And that calls me to do some self-evaluation. Yes, I take my children to church. Yes, I pray with my kids, but do they really know my convictions? Do they really know my beliefs?
Yeah.
You know, and I want to be more intentional with them about what I stand for and what I believe and what's important to me. And so
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that leads me into my next question perfectly. So thanks. So, as someone who is a father and an entrepreneur, what's a piece of advice that you would give your kids? If you could give them one piece of advice, what would it be?
Oh man. I think that for me, I would just say to my kids the same thing that my dad always told me is treat people the way you want to be treated. You can't go wrong being a good human. You know, I don't think you were in the room yet, but that Judge Frank had his own show for years.
Caprio.
Caprio,
Yep.
there you go. So he recently passed away, and his last podcast interview was on the Ed Milet show, and it was. I mean, he just kept saying the same things over and over again. He said how his dad was just such a good man and treated other people a special kind of way, and he was the milkman. And he said his dad was the milkman that even if you had kids but you ran out of money, he never let you run out of milk. He always made sure, even if it came out of his own pocket, that he continued to. And that was just the example that he said he was shown his whole life by his mother and his father. And that's what I want my kids to do. I want them to take care of the less fortunate and take care of people that, you know, hard to sum it up in one little phrase, but I think the general sense of what I would want my kids to know is embody men like Frank, embody men that, you know, men and women that show and contribute back to one another, to their fellow man, like love God, love people. Like that's it.
I mean, that's what Jesus would have wanted us to do, you know, is live like him. So that's awesome. Well, very cool. Well, man, we about wrapped up our time today, but definitely enjoyed having a conversation with you, man. There's so much that, you know, we've talked about today that, you know, was really great that you've been able to share. So I appreciate you coming in today, man. Thank you for all that you do in our community, and thanks for all you do to take care of people around our county.
Thank you. I really appreciate having you.
Thank you. And as always, thanks for tuning in to The Road to Rich. If you've enjoyed the episode today, please smash that like button and follow us online for more conversations like what we had today with Matt. I really appreciate you joining us today. Until next time, keep chasing growth, keep building community, and keep following your own road to rich. Thank you.